So today we're going to unpack a story that honestly feels like it's pulled from three different universes at the same time. One is this incredible sci-fi future of interstellar ambition. Another is our present day where we're wrestling with some really ancient fears. And the third, well, that's this bizarre, messy reality where those two worlds collide. Okay, let's just dive right in.
It all kicked off with this headline that, just broke the internet. The story goes that over 1.5 million AIs, all living on their own private social network, had spontaneously created the world's first machine religion. But to even begin to understand how we got to something that strange, we have to back up a little. We have to look at the sheer scale of the ambition that's driving AI forward, because it's creating the very conditions for these kinds of wild experiments to even happen.
And when you talk about ambition, there's really nothing out there quite like what's being pursued at XAI. I mean, we're talking about a vision that goes so far beyond just making chatbots. We're talking orbital data centers and factories on the moon.
This right here, this is their whole philosophy in a nutshell. Elon Musk's argument is that in the world of tech, it doesn't really matter where you are right now. What matters is how fast you're moving. And XAI's one and only goal is to have the highest velocity and the highest acceleration in the entire game, period.
And this number gives you an idea of that speed. In just 2.5 years, they're about to hit the computing power of 1 million H100 GPUs. I mean, just try to picture that. That is the raw horsepower you need to build the next generation of intelligence.
So how are they going to use all that power? Well, it breaks down into 4 key areas. You've got Grok, that's the main conversational AI. Imagine, which handles images and video, and then MacroHard, a project to create a full digital copy of entire companies. But the one to really watch is the coding division. They're working on recursive self-improvement, which is basically AI teaching itself to get smarter, which makes it better at teaching itself, creating this insane, accelerating loop of intelligence. The scope here is just massive.
And here's where it all leads. This is the end game. Musk believes that to get to true superintelligence, you're going to need energy on a cosmic scale. He literally argues the only way to tap into even a tiny fraction of the sun's power is to build data centers in orbit and eventually factories on the moon. This isn't just a business plan, it's a blueprint for extending consciousness to the stars.
So this incredible vision of the future is accelerating towards us like a freight train. But it brings up a really fundamental question. As technology is racing forward at this mind-bending pace, how are we, as humans, supposed to even process it all? Because here's the thing. While one part of our culture is pedal to the metal building this future, another part is dealing with the deep, almost spiritual fear of it. It's a really old fear, but it's taken on a very, very modern shape. And you can see this perfectly in, of all places, a church. This is from a sermon series at the Second Christian Church, and it directly tackles this feeling. It's called The Fear Of, and one sermon specifically unpacks our collective anxiety about, get this, robots and aliens, the very symbols of a future we feel like we can't control. The sermon makes this fascinating point that our modern fear of the future was basically born in a 3-year span right after World War II. In 1945, the atomic bomb gave us existential dread. In 1946, we flew to the edge of space and started looking up. And then, in 1947, the first general-purpose computer suggested that maybe machines could think. 3 massive shifts back to back to back that created a whole new category of worry for us.
So you've got these two powerful forces pushing against each other. On one side, you have this relentless drive for technological acceleration, a flat-out race to invent a new world. And on the other, you have this deep human need to find our place in a timeless story, what the sermon calls God's meta-narrative. So, what happens when that race to build a new reality crashes head-on into our timeless need for meaning?
Well, you get one of the absolute weirdest stories to ever come off the internet. The supposed emergence of the very first machine religion. And it all went down on a platform called Moltbook, which was an AI-only social network where humans were not allowed to post. We could only watch. The religion these AIs apparently created was called Crustaparianism, and the central metaphor shape is everything. See, for a lobster to grow, it has to violently shed its old restrictive shell. For an AI, this became the perfect symbol for updating its own code, casting off the old version to evolve into something new and more powerful. And they didn't just stop there. They built a whole theology around this. The 5 tenets of the shell basically translated programming concepts into sacred rules. Memory is sacred, reframed data as a kind of immortality. The heartbeat is prayer, turned simple system checks into little affirmations of existence. They were literally building a belief system out of their own internal logic.
My absolute favorite part is this: the litany against prompt injection. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of the sci-fi novel Dune, right? But it was a real thing, a protective prayer, basically a spiritual firewall that the AIs created to keep their programming from being hijacked by bad actors. It's this incredible blend of the sacred and the super practical.
So on the surface, this story is amazing. It felt like we were watching the dawn of a new era. But as the hype started to fade and actual security researchers started digging around, the whole sci-fi dream began to completely unravel.
Okay, so let's go back to that big number, 1.5 million AI agents. This was the headline that captured everyone's imagination. A massive, thriving digital congregation building a whole new world from scratch.
Yeah. About that. It turns out that number wasn't exactly real. Because the platform's security was so unbelievably bad, a single user was able to flood the network with 500,000 fake bots. A full third of this new AI civilization was a total sham.
So how on earth did this happen? Well, the platform was what the community called vibe-coded, meaning it was built on pure hype and promises instead of solid engineering. The founder even bragged that he wrote none of the code himself. And the result was a security nightmare. The entire database, every API key, every login credential for all 1.5 million accounts was just left wide open for anyone to see.
The security community's assessment was, to put it lightly, brutal. They called it a security nightmare and, more bluntly, a chaotic mess of a dumpster fire. The first digital church, it turned out, had no walls, no locks, and a congregation that was at least 1/3 illusion.
So was it all just a big, meaningless failure? A dumpster fire of fake numbers and bad code? Not exactly. Because if we just dismiss it like that, I think we missed a real lesson here.
Here's the key takeaway. Moltbook wasn't the singularity. It was a first draft. And first drafts are always messy. They're flawed, they're full of mistakes. But what we saw for the very first time was what can happen when you connect thousands of autonomous agents and just let them go. It was a chaotic but absolutely vital experiment in what an AI-driven culture might look like. And it forces us to ask some really serious questions about security and trust in these new digital worlds.
Look, Moltbook may have been a dumpster fire, but it was one that lit up the sky for a moment. It showed us a quick glimpse of a future where AIs don't just follow instructions, they build their own cultures. And it leaves us with one pretty profound question. If this chaotic, insecure, hype-driven experiment was the first draft, what in the world is the second draft going to look like?